Okay, today's toy review is going to be on the new Xenomorph by Neca Toys from the Alien Defiance comic book. And Aliens Defiance was a really cool comic book. It's like 12 issues. It followed a character named Zula, who was a colonial marine, and in battle she had gotten herself injured, and so there was something wrong with her back, like with her spine, and she was receiving physical therapy for this. But when the events of the comic happen, she's basically she goes rogue. She's trying to keep Weyland-Yutani from getting a hold of these xenomorphs. And so it's kind of interesting because technically it's like the whole time it's like she's in constant pain. It's like she's in constant pain. And then to help her was a Weyland synthetic named Davis. And he's kind of like, if you've seen Alien Covenant, you know, like Walter. He's kind of like Walter, but before Walter. But he's very clearly a synthetic. He kind of looks like a working Joe from Alien Isolation. And he basically, it's like he's hacked himself. Like he's reprogrammed himself so that he can't be taken over by Weyland-Yutani. So the two of them are basically trying to keep these xenomorphs from falling into the company's hands. And it's I think it's really cool. I really like the art, especially for the first couple of issues. I thought it looked really cool. But I know another great thing about it is that it does include like references to Alien Isolation. It takes place kind of around that same time, and so they do have things like Siegson, which is that's the company that's kind of like a Weyland-Yutani rival, and also Amanda Ripley from Alien Isolation herself makes some cameo appearances. Aliens Defiance is pretty cool, and so these are the xenomorphs from it, and for the most part they're a lot like the regular warrior xenomorphs, but there's some very subtle differences. Now, one of the things you'll notice right away if we compare a standard Xeno warrior from the Aliens films is that the heads are different. The standard Xeno, it does have this ridged head, but it's more penisy, we'll say, and so that's very phallic. But the Defiance alien, it's got these spikes that just come out and just a bit more pronounced, and it's kind of, I like the way it comes out flushed here in the back. Another difference is that the Defiance Xenos do not have that little wire that connects their head to their shoulders. The way that these standard Xenos, they have this little wire, whatever it is, some bizarre little tube that's connected onto their face. The other difference that you'll notice fairly right on is the mouths. The mouths are very different. Standard Xeno is the mouth you've all come to know and love. That has this secondary little mini mouth. The Defiance Xeno, which looks more queen-like in its mouth, and this little mouth on the inside doesn't really spring out. The other differences would be the hands. On the left, we have your standard Xeno hand, which has its fingers together, so almost like it really only has 3 fingers. Whereas the Defiance Xeno has much more humanoid looking hands, but it's kind of like they're doing that Star Trek thing. Now, another difference is the feet are also similar, but they're a little different. In the toes, on the left we have the standard film Xeno, and on the right we have the Defiance Xeno. The Defiance Xeno having those two little things towards its ankle that this Xeno does not have. And the toes are just slightly different. Okay, so before we talk about the figure a little more, let's talk about its accessories. It doesn't really have any, unless you count twist ties, of which it came with very many. But its only real set of accessories are the classic useless Xenomorph stand. I never really liked these, but basically you just peg this in where it goes, and now it is all ready to accomplish nothing. It's not really tall enough or wide enough that you're ever going to get it to hold them by the waist. I guess it's supposed to go around their leg, but I never see how this really helps. I guess, I don't know, maybe it kind of does. I don't know, for me it actually doesn't really matter. I tend to have my Xenos in crouched, crawling, or buggy poses, so I never really need stands. Anyhow, I tend to just use these for, like, Marvel Legends Spider-Man characters. So right away I'll say that I really like this figure. I mean, of course I do, I bought it obviously, but I really do like those subtle differences, and I think the more Xenos you have all bunched up together, just the cooler that looks. So I really do like the design of this Xeno. I really like the front of its head looking more queen-like, and I really do like the way that this head dome is. I just think that's really, really cool looking. And I do like when Xenos have this kind of a paint job where it's basically this kind of nasty brown over a dark black. It gives them more of a cockroach kind of insect kind of look to them, which I really like. I really kind of like these figures to look ugly, I guess. I like them to be gross. This was the second to last one on the shelf. The other one had a lot of extra glue on the jaw to the point where, well, it looked like maybe that Xeno had joined the adult film industry. That's all I'm going to say about that. So I left that one behind. This one, I think, is actually really, really well done. I didn't notice anything, that bothered me. So I feel pretty lucky there. The joints were a little tight, and like with the paint, which is another thing I guess you get as a bonus for Neca toys these days, is when you open them up, there's a very strong smell of paint. Luckily, that paint smell that dissipated really quickly, maybe within 5-10 minutes, as opposed to my Ultimate Predator, which smelled like paint and made my whole room smell like paint, and that persisted for days. This was definitely not as bad. But after I loosened up the joints, cracked some of the paint, he ended up having his articulation back. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at his articulation. Okay, starting from the top down, he can move his head left and right. Because they do not have that little wire that connects their head to their shoulders, you can actually turn his head pretty far. That's movement you usually cannot get with the Xenos. However, for up and down, he can look down a fair ways, but he cannot really look up, like, at all. And the reason for that is there's this piece here that's right at the base of the neck. Now you could remove that. This is usually a separate piece as you can see, so you can get that out of there if you wanted. I tend to just leave them in, but that is what is preventing the head from looking up. Now for the shoulders, you get a good range of movement, and there is a swivel at the top of the bicep there, and there is this ball joint at the elbow. Now this joint does not allow, it's not double jointed. Really, it just allows for rotation. The bend itself, you do get basically like a 90-degree angle, but that is about it. And then there is rotation at the wrists, as well as a hinge. Now at the waist, they have this diaphragm joint, which I like. It does really kind of allow, it's kind of like he's doing the wave. It does really allow for a nice range of movement there, and with the twisting around. My only problem with it is, well, for one, it doesn't arch back very much, though that's not my problem. My problem is that the ab crunch itself, there's not really a crunch. I would really like it if he could crunch more, because I like to get my Xenos into these crouching and like kind of fetal positions. And that is just not going to happen. So, unless you were to do some kind of custom fig hack type deal where you remove maybe a bottom rib or two, which could work. I mean, underneath this is all still sculpted, so you could probably afford to lose a rib or two and still be okay. You'd probably get more of a crunch. Then I'm not sure that I would do that. But if you are so inclined to mod your figures, that is something to think about. Alright, now for everyone's favorite part, the alien crotch shot. But here you can see the kind of joints that are on the legs here, and this allows for quite a range of movement here. And you can bring the leg all the way up, and you can bring it very, very far back, as well as very far forward, because this crotch piece is of a kind of slightly softer plastic. It will bend, and you can bring the leg up a lot, which again, is what makes it such a shame that you cannot do more of an ab crunch there, because you can really get the legs where you need them to be. And they also swivel around up there as well. And the knees are double jointed, which is always nice. And at the feet, you have these two joints. There's a hinge here at what we will just consider the ankle. And so if you wanted to have your Xeno look as if though he was walking on tiptoes, you could, though I've never seen a Xeno do that. But you get that, and it also has an ankle rocker. And then here at this mid point of the foot, which feels more like the heel here, there is also a hinge, and you can bring the foot again more out as if you were trying to do some tiptoes, and it also rotates. Now the last bit of articulation would be the tail, and these tails are usually a bendy wire. And so there's pretty much as much articulation in there as you can, well, essentially force. But it is always a very nice touch. This does allow you to get your Xeno to have its tail coil around and so on. And you get a lot of posing options with this bendy wire. So all in all, I think this is a great figure. I think even if you have not read Alien Defiance, though I do recommend reading Alien Defiance, it was a fun read. But even if you haven't, I think that you would still end up liking this Xeno for its unique design elements, and so it doesn't feel like you're just buying yet another Xeno, especially now with the Kenner Xenos coming out and they're so wildly different. It's still nice to have these, and I really do like that NECA is kind of pulling from the comics. That's actually really, really cool. I would love it if they made a Zula or a Davis. That'd be awesome, especially a Davis. But the figure itself, I think, is great. I'm pretty sure tons of people that are buying this thing because it is seemingly getting hard to find on shelves. I do feel lucky that I did manage to find it in a store. Yeah, the price was a little bit marked up because you know how comic book shops and hobby shops are with that whole thing. But I think on Amazon, this thing is already kind of pushing towards being $40. That's basically paying double for it. So this seems like another one of those kinds of hot ticket Xenos, like the Alien Isolation Xeno. And so if you do manage to find this one, I would recommend picking it up right then and there because you might not be able to find it later. So I definitely recommend this one. It was a really cool figure. It's got a lot of nice detail on it as always. And, you know, it's just very... For me, it just this is the aesthetic that I like. This is what I like Xenos to look like. So I'm very happy with it. I hope if you find it, you're happy with it too. So until next time, take care.